I would have sort of fumbled my way through the introduction. And then people would have probably stopped listening to my interview, not because there wasn't going to be anything valuable for them, but just because I didn't show up very confidently right at the start.
You're listening to Podcasting for Experts, with honest conversations about using podcasting as a tool to grow your reach, increase your audience, make a positive impact on the world, and most importantly, to get paid for your efforts. I'm your host, Jess, and we are Pristine Podcasts. Let's talk podcasting.
Hey, and welcome back. This is season 3, episode 8. I'm Jess, co-founder here at Pristine Podcasts, and in today's episode, we're talking about leveraging podcast guest interviews. So I'd already at the start of this season talked about podcast guesting as an amazing way to make new listeners aware of your show. But today I want to dive into what you can do after you've actually been a guest on someone else's show to be sure that you're leveraging the interview that you did in the best way possible. So let's get started. So leveraging your guest appearances actually starts a little bit before you have the interview. If you want to leverage any sort of public appearance, then, well, you're going to need to make sure that you are actually making the right impression. There are a few things that I would recommend that you have prepared, and this is something that we can, dive into in more depth in another episode as to what that exactly should look like. But the things that I would expect you to have before you get onto someone's podcast is, number one, all of the info that your interviewer needs from you ahead of time. So that is your bio, your headshot, your website links, any other information that you discussed you should be exchanging, you should have sent to your host way ahead of the interview. There's nothing worse than the host having to scramble when they're trying to publish the episode because they can't find the things that they need from you. If you are allowed to promote something on the show, then you should know exactly what that is going to be, where people can find it, how people can get access to it, and be very sure that the thing that you're offering out is highly relevant to that audience where you're having the guest appearance. So if there is a special URL that you need to know, make sure you've got it written down so that you don't forget about it. And just remember that people are on their phones, they can't type in really long URLs, they can't remember it. So make it super short, super memorable, like your URL/one word, okay? If there's any coupon codes that they need, make sure that you've got them written down. Make sure that they're easy, that there isn't any complicated spelling in the coupon codes, anything like that. If you aren't entirely sure that the audience that you're speaking to can really benefit from the free offer or maybe a low-priced offer that you're allowed to promote, then you are better off either making another freebie that works and that still leads into your offers naturally, or you're better off, in my opinion, to legitimately not promote anything. I have done that. I've spoken to audiences that had absolutely no overlap with my audience. I just mentioned what it is that I do, and we had a super amazing conversation. And, there is people who are going to listen to that who are like, oh, I need what they do. I'm going to go check that person out. But I'm not going to go offer a freebie to an audience where 99.9% of people are not my people. I'm just using that interview to repurpose, to show that I've had a guest appearance there and things like that. So it's still valuable to me personally, but potentially not in the sense of lead generation or anything like that. Of course, number 3, before you go for the interview, you should be prepared. So know things about the interviewer, listen to their previous episodes, see who else they had on, understand the general format that the episode actually takes normally. Because sometimes, I've noticed that for some interviews that I do, the guest will introduce me. I personally don't introduce my guests or waste time with introduction. I get straight to the interview, and then I do an introduction when I record the intro afterwards. However, I have also been a guest on some shows where I was required to introduce myself in a specific way. So if I hadn't listened to the previous episodes or the host hadn't mentioned that to me, I would have been completely ill prepared and I would have sort of fumbled my way through the introduction. And then people would have probably stopped listening to my interview, not because there wasn't going to be anything valuable for them, but just because I didn't show up very confidently right at the start. Like if I don't even know who I am, what I do, and how I help people in this specific way, how can there be a valuable interview at the end of this? Right? So that's super important that you are aware of the structure the show takes, what you're expected to do, and make sure that you have that prepared, even if you write something down that you're literally going to read off while you're in the interview. And number 4, if the interview has sent you a list of topics, you might want to look at them, because I have had situations where people have been caught off guard by things that I asked about. They were very surprised. And I'm like, well, I did send a list of things I was going to ask you about. And that's something I noticed. And that's why I wanted to, have a chat about it. So if someone bothers to send you a list of topics, look at them. And if there's anything that you are uncomfortable to talk about or that you don't really feel like going into detail on, then just let the person know right at the start of the interview. Like there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I looked at your list. I noticed you said you wanted to talk about A, B, C, D. At this point here, it's still a bit fresh and a bit raw. And I don't really feel comfortable talking about that publicly at this moment in time. And that's okay. Just be honest about it. And then you don't have an awkward moment hoping that they'll not bring it up in the interview. Then once you've done the actual interview, you are going to want to make sure that you actually have a very clear follow-up process happening for any leads that might come in from this interview. So for example, if you have designed a very specific freebie for that person's audience that shows your expertise, well, lead generation is one thing, but we want qualified leads. We don't want random leads for our business, right? So if you've been on someone else's show and you're going to want to keep in touch with the people who are coming to get that freebie that you made for them, how are you going to lead them to your offers that you normally have? How are you going to qualify them? How are you going to bring up that topic? Do you have follow-up email sequences set up when they opt in? They're going to get 3-4 emails to be introduced to you a bit further. They're going to hear about the kind of things that you can help people with, etc. So while you're in that limbo period between you having done the interview and the interview publishing, use that time to make sure that your follow-up is really good. Use that time to make sure that you've tested the landing page, that it really does work. How many times have I seen people sending links out to landing pages where the opt-in form isn't connected to anything and is not working, and they've just lost out on leads coming into their business because they just didn't check the tech? And then very important, know the release date of the episode. Not necessarily the exact date, but kind of the calendar week kind of thing, or maybe just a month is better than nothing if they're recording way ahead of time, because just before that interview goes live, you want to test the tech again. Trust me, website updates happen, WordPress updates automatically. Suddenly some of your shizzle isn't working anymore how it's supposed to. I've done this for years. So you want to check it again just before it goes live. Knowing the release date is also going to help you, not just because of being able to test your tech, but also because you can plan this episode releasing into your actual content calendar. So find out from the host if they will email you just before the episode goes live, if they're going to give you all of the links, are they going to give you any graphics that you can use to promote the show? Make sure that you get all of the final URLs ready to go that you need to be able to full on promote the episode the time that it's coming out, because this episode isn't just useful for your guest's audience, it can also be super useful for your audience. So you need to tell them about it. If the release date has come and gone and you haven't heard anything from the host, just check if the episode is actually live. I don't know how many times people have actually forgotten to just email their guests to let them know. So if that happens, then go check yourself, go get the links yourself, and just promote it yourself. The other thing that you want to check is if you're linked up on the host's website. So if the host is actually publishing blog posts with show notes for each and every single episode, do check the host has actually linked back to your site, to your social media, to your freebie, whatever. Because there's nothing worse than you being in the episode saying, hey, I created this freebie for you. You can get it at mywebsite.com/freebie. And then the host hasn't actually linked up any of that information. And I have had that happen quite a few times. And I notice with some people that it seems to be intentional, that they don't really link to their guest much. And I think that's a little bit sad because people have taken 1 hour, 2 hours and prep time out of their life to go and come on your show. The minimum respect that you can pay is to link back to their website. So if the host hasn't put your link, ask the host to link back to your site. Backlinks are super useful for SEO. It gives your website better reputation, and that's going to help everyone in the long run because you are going to do the same thing as well. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So check if the host is linked back to your website. If not, ask them for it. Just say, hey, I noticed the episode published and I just checked the show notes. Would you mind to please add the link here back to my website? Or would you mind to link up the freebie that we talked about in the episode so people can get it more easily, Like frame it so that it's an advantage for the host, because the host won't get any questions about you. The host won't have to answer any questions about where's that freebie. Always think about what would benefit that person. It's about you, but it's also about them. Okay, the next thing that you want to do is this. You want to be in all of the places where this episode may get shared by the host. So if the host has a community and they normally promote their episode in their community and, people comment on their post, well, then you want to be sure that you're in that community. And on that day, you post in the comments on any post that goes out and you say, thanks again. Thanks so much for having me. I had a great time talking about this. If anyone has any questions, would like to have follow-up conversations, would like to reach out to me directly to discuss this specific topic, feel free to just drop me a message. I'm here for you. I'm here in the comments. When people comment on the episode, and they say, oh, this was really interesting, reply to each and every single comment. So that is the day where you've really got to be there to thank people for listening, to encourage people to connect with you, to say, hey, I have lots more good stuff like that on my podcast. Why don't you come and listen to it? It has to be beneficial to you. So you have to be wherever it gets shared. Be in stories, reshare it to your audience. Be on LinkedIn, do the same thing. Thank people, encourage questions, reply to every comment. If the episode gets published on YouTube, leave a comment there, tell people how they can get hold of you, etc. So you really want to leverage this by directly interacting with the host and with other people, and not just have it be like a silent thing that gets published once and then it kind of just disappears immediately, right? And then once the initial storm of that day and that, rush of replying to people is over, what you want to do is you want to take the time to repurpose this content. And as always, there are a million ways in which that you can actually repurpose, but some of my favorites are just getting a transcript of the episode, because I find it way easier to create content from text than from just listening to audio again and again. So you can use that transcript to then grab quotes, to make little graphics that you can share regularly, to prepare audiograms so you can highlight some really key points of the interview, and you can turn those key points into little videos with the audio wave on it. You can create tweets from those quotes and schedule them over the next few weeks or even months. And all of this is going to end up building up your content library as you do more and more interviews. You can write a blog post about your experience. This is something that I would really encourage you to do. So you could say, hey, this is my interview with so-and-so. If the interview is on YouTube, you can just embed the YouTube video on your website. It will still count as plays for the host, but people can just watch it there and then, You can write about everything that you talked about. You can put your key takeaways there. You can link to resources that you think would be helpful, and you can link back to the host's website, where they can read more about the host. So the host benefits from backlinks at this point as well. Of course, I only do that if the host actually linked to my website, because if you're not going to link to me, I'm sorry, but in that case, I get a bit petty and I'm like, I'm not going to link to you. Then you can also send an email to your email list if you have one. You can send actually multiple emails highlighting different aspects. So you can do one announcement email where you're like, hey, I did an interview with so-and-so, listen to it here. You can do another one like, did you know that this is like the number one thing holding people back? And then you can just write a bit more extra stuff, and then you can link back to the episode, and you can do a third one as well with a different aspect of something you've talked about. So you can send multiple emails about the same thing as long as you make it interesting for the person who's reading the email. And then if you haven't done that yet, you may also want to create a media page or a guest appearances page on your website, and then you can add this guest appearance alongside any other ones that you may have had in the past onto that page on your website. And that is actually going to help you in the long run, because when you apply to become a guest on more high-level shows that have a higher production value, people get way more selective about the guests that they have. Like realistically, if I was doing an interview every single week, I could still only talk to 52 people a year. If I only have one interview a month, that's 12 interviews in a month. So I need to pick and choose very wisely who are the people that can come onto my show that would really bring value to my audience. And I want to be sure that they are well-spoken, they're well-prepared, they have something of value to offer. And if I see that you have previous guest appearances on your website, then I could watch those, listen to those, and I could then make a judgment on whether we would be a good fit to, chat on my podcast. So that's actually going to help you in the long run. And of course, if you have been on bigger shows, it adds to your credibility as a guest. So those things are always going to go a long way. Alrighty, that's really it from me for this episode. If you're not currently doing guest interviews, I really hope that you will consider it, because it really is a great way for your show and your business as a whole to raise awareness and to bring more people within your reach. If you haven't joined yet, I'd love to welcome you into our Facebook group so that we can continue the conversation over there. As always, I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you for the next one.
That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate you. If you are looking for a community where you can brainstorm with like-minded podcasters and business owners, then don't forget to check out our Facebook group. You can find it at pristinepodcast.com/group. The link is also in the show notes.